Macmillan's Mayerling is, of course, the result of his collaboration with many other people.
Yeah. Can we just hold a second?
How important is it for you to work with people you know well?
Well, very important indeed. You know, when I go to other companies abroad, I get very, very nervous because I don't know the way people move. You know, I'm not used to the way they move or think. If I go to Germany, for instance, there's a language problem as well, you know.
And this gives you a lot of confidence working with the same people?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah. Do you know where we are?
We worked on it, I think, for probably 10 months. There was never, ever an element of doubt, which I enjoyed. Kenneth was very positive about the way he wanted the ballet to turn out. And consequently, it's been a very fruitful 10 months. And one, in fact, for me as a dancer, working with a choreographer, a period of time which has been really without too many problems, apart from the sort of technical problems, but the actual line that Kenneth wanted to follow, I felt I was following as well, naturally, as opposed to him having to implant in me what he wanted. We were sort of on parallel lines, thinking.
Instead of pushing her, so, you see, from there, if you had a, could you use that word?
Macmillan has worked with Lynn Seymour for 20 years.
The difference in working with Kenneth and anybody else that I've worked with is that he involves you in the actual process of creating. You're not just a pound of meat doing the steps that he tells you to. You're given the opportunity to contribute a great deal of your own self and your own thoughts and your own intelligence and everything else, which is terrific.
Once more. Your music.
It would be... No dancer can see themselves or see the effect that they create. It's only another pair of eyes that can do that. His are obviously very, very keen. He seems to find peculiar qualities in people that he likes and which he brings out very deftly and always, I think, successfully.
Well, let's try working out this, going into the right.
And you worked with the same designer, Nico Georgiadis, for
Yes.
a great number of years.
Yes. He designed my first ballet, yes.
What was his reaction when you asked him to do Mayerling?
My God, how am I going to make a bustle work on the stage while you're dancing?
And how did he?
Oh, he did, very well. I mean, he got the silhouette of the period at the same time making them able to dance as well, which is, you know, a great feat.
Remarkably, the collaboration with his music man, John Lanchbury, took place by correspondence at a distance of 12,000 miles. Lanchbury is the conductor of the Australian Ballet.
Having worked out with Kenneth a blow-by-blow description of the whole thing in scenes and numbers and so on, and having agreed with him on the timing of it and the way each number looked, how its shape was, where its climax was and so on, I then had to try and find, out of that welter of stuff I'd listened to, I had to match scene for scene. And when I was going through all the works, I did a sort of checklist, rather like a Michelin guide. I mean, 1 star, 2 star, 3 stars. Letter T, marvellous romantic tune, gets too hysterical at letter V, and things like that. And I had welters of papers with descriptions of music. And I sent it to Kenneth, but with a fair amount of descriptions here and there. Scene change begins, musical interlude, royal exit, return of guests, interruption of pas de deux, and so on, so that Kenneth knew what I was about. And for safety's sake, since we were 12,000 miles away, I made every number a little longer than I thought necessary and marked where he could cut and gave him various sort of possible cuts, because it is really rather like having a suit made to measure. So I made the sleeves a little long and the back a bit too broad and so on. And Kenneth did put those cuts in, most of them anyway. And back came a most enthusiastic telegram from him. Amazed, delighted, wonderful first act. Can't wait for the second. Love, Kenneth.
What's the 9? What's that? Uh-huh. How much more?
About 4/8 of the quick.
Some more
And then some
slow.
more slow, yeah.
Oh, yes, but they can join me on the slow.
Just when they...
Yes.
As we've gone
Sorry. Mark it from the first 8 and the 10.
How do you write for somebody to choreograph? What did you put on the page?
Well, I began with some general notes, and I included a photocopy of a drawing that Rudolph had done as a child, which was a man with a gun, shooting a bird which was falling apart in the air. He did that at the age of 10. Notes on the main characters that I felt were right for ballet. For instance, two characters which played quite a part in Rudolph's life were his valet, Loschek. Well, Loschek really had nothing to recommend him in terms of ballet. I mean, he waited on Rudolph, and he was there at the time of the suicide. And his cab driver, Bratfish. But Bratfish was immediately a character right for ballet. He was known as an entertainer in the kind of low dives that Rudolph went to. He was a whistler, in fact. I've suggested acrobatics to Kenneth as a substitute for whistling. Kenneth, in fact, sent Graham Fletcher to a circus to learn very dexterous tricks with a top hat.
To the back.
Excellent hat tricks. Very good.
Run, run.
Every detail of the work must be recorded so that there's an exact record for future casts and other companies. This becomes the Bible of the ballet. Jackie Hollander is the choreologist or dance notator.
We use Benish movement notation.
Basically, the notation is really built up of just 3 symbols. One, meaning a limb level with the body. A vertical one, meaning a limb in front of the body. And a dot, meaning a limb behind the body. Now, depending on whereabout on the stave you put it, for instance, the other basic thing is that we look from behind the dancer. So if we had that, those would be 2 feet together, level. The bottom line denote the feet, then the knees, then the waist, then the shoulders, then the top of the head. So you could, in fact, draw a little stick figure and show the extremities. So if we wanted to note, say he was looking to the left, if we wanted to notate that position, we'd have 2 feet level on the floor, 2 arms shoulder height, so between the waist and the shoulder, and the head is turned to the left.
This is the pas de deux where Mary comes to Rudolph and they make the suicide pact. The top stave is for Mary and the bottom stave is for Rudolph. Rudolph's position, here he's sitting, and I know he's sitting by the fact that I've written support signs on the hip line, and I said, therefore, he's supported, and I've written above by what? He's supported by the chair. His body is slumped forward. His head is bent forward, and his upper body is bent forward. His knees are bent in front of him, and his feet are flat on the floor in front of him, and he's facing the front. They dance together for a while, and then Rudolph sees the gun, goes over to the desk, and picks up the gun. This symbol here is showing the stage location. That's really quite far over to the left, and he's facing diagonally downstage. He's standing on his left foot, his right foot is pointed behind him, elbows are bent in front, and his hands are in front of him, just under the shoulder, with the support symbol, meaning that he's holding the gun and his head is down. At the end of the pas de deux, they're walking around the stage, holding the gun between them. When they get back to the center of the stage, both their heads are lifted, their hands are above their heads. Mary's hand is above her head, holding Rudolph's hand. Rudolph's hand is above his head, and he's also holding the gun.
The third act of Macmillan's Mayerling charts Rudolph's final descent to physical decay, unsound mind, and suicide. At a hunt, he shoots wildly, narrowly missing his father and killing a servant. It's suggested by his enemies at court that Rudolph tried to kill his father. His fathers refused to let him divorce Stephanie or to listen to Rudolph's progressive views on the future of the empire. To dull the pain of his disease, Rudolph's now dependent on morphine. In Macmillan's Mayerling, events now quickly move towards their tragic climax. Countess Lariche again comes to Rudolph. He's in despair and drugged. The Empress is horrified to discover them together and orders the Countess Lariche to leave. The Countess gets her revenge by bringing Mary to Rudolph. And Rudolph finds a partner willing to die with him.
sure that she was terrified when it came to the crunch, but at the same time, I don't think she had anything else to do. There was nothing else in life that was worth doing if she couldn't be with him. And I don't think he loved her particularly, but there was obviously a terrific physical rapport. But their relationship was 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, they only met a few times.
The suicide pact and the suicide wasn't, in fact, the end of the story.
No, it was the beginning of another story, really. And it was this which proved to be my starting point. When I read that after the bodies were found, immediately the bulletins were given out from the court that Rudolph died of a heart attack, not blown his head off. He wouldn't have been able to have had a state burial if he'd committed suicide. Also, the Prime Minister and the Emperor felt that this would be the beginning of the disintegration of the dynasty. Mary was dumped unceremoniously into a linen basket at Mayerling. Then her 2 uncles were told to go and collect the body, but they were told not only to collect it, they were made to dress her as in life and to drive her, seated between them in a carriage, to a monastery 4 miles away at Heiligenkreuz, where she was buried.
Franz Joseph remained emperor for another 27 years, the House of Habsburg falling in 1918, just 2 years after his death. Elizabeth was assassinated with a knife by an Italian anarchist in Geneva in 1898. Stephanie remarried and lived in Hungary until her death in 1945. Mary's mother was ostracized by society and encouraged to stay away from Vienna. The Countess Lariche was banished from court. She was divorced and married again 3 times and wrote a book to clear herself of blame for the tragedy. Bay Middleton died in a fall from his horse. Mitzi Casper and Joseph Bratfish were provided for in Rudolph's will. Mayerling's a magnet for tourists, although there's little left to see. There's a small tower in the grounds, the keeper's lodge, but no one bothers to look at it. Franz Joseph had a chapel erected on the site of the death room. The weeping Madonna, with a knife in her heart, is said to have the face of Rudolph's mother, the Empress Elizabeth. And the couple are said to have died on the bed in a room above where the altar now stands. Mary's grave was desecrated by the Russians in the Second World War, but it's been restored. In his last letter, Rudolph requested that he and Mary should be buried side by side at Heiligenkreuz. This last wish of the Crown Prince Rudolph was ignored.
Thanks very much.